A lot for us to dig into. MSNBC senior national security reporter David Rohde is here on set with me, and thankfully an MSNBC person officially. Mark Leibovich, staff writer at The Atlantic. He's also an MSNBC political contributor. And Barbara McQuade, a former U.S. attorney and professor at the University of Michigan Law School. She's also an MSNBC legal analyst, pros one and all. David, I'll come to you first. Just walk us through what we can expect from Comey today.
It was mentioned already, but it's a motion that will argue that the prosecution of Comey is selective and vindictive. The selective part is that has anyone else faced a charge like this? Is it really unprecedented or not? And vindictive, and this is the interesting part, in a sense, politically, the extraordinary role of Donald Trump publicly calling for these charges to be brought. The fact that the career prosecutors in the Eastern District of Virginia, as far as we've been told, didn't feel there was enough of a case here to bring it. He then ousts one person there and then brings in his former personal attorney, Lindsay Halligan. So that's what we expect. And, we don't know how the judge in the case will rule. And even if the judge rules one way or another, this can be appealed and go to a higher court. Yeah, so it's likely just the first chapter in a very long book that we're going to see written here in regards to Comey. But Barb, what do you see as the potential strength of these claims that the prosecution was vindictive? That's one that is typically hard to succeed on the merits of. But in this instance, it does feel like it has a point. And then the other piece of it, which is that Halligan herself not only has no prosecutorial experience, but they're charging that potentially she's in her role illegally. And thusly, that could erode the legitimacy of this case even further, right? Talk to us about what you see here.
Yes, vindictive prosecution can be very difficult to prove because prosecutors enjoy an enormous amount of discretion under our constitutional separation of powers. Ordinarily, it comes in a case where prosecutors say, because you exercise your right to appeal, we're going to crack down and bring more serious charges against you. So it is retaliating against someone for exercising a known legal right. The theory Jim Comey has here is a little bit novel, which is, the right he was exercising was just the right to do his job or to speak out. It's a little bit separate from the rest of the case. And so this one might be an uphill battle. But the appointment issue, I think, is a very strong argument. There are three ways a U.S. attorney can be appointed. One way is with Senate confirmation. Another way is through the Federal Vacancies Reform Act, which allows the appointment of somebody who's either been presidentially appointed and Senate confirmed to some other position or has been serving in that agency for 90 days, or through the interim process where someone gets to serve for 120 days. Lindsay Halligan meets none of those qualifications. They already had their go at the 120-day interim with Eric Siebert. And so because there is no path for appointment, I think there's a very strong argument here that Halligan's appointment is illegal. We're going to hear arguments about that in the Third Circuit Court of Appeals today regarding Alina Habba, and that may give us some insights. But of course, this case is pending in the Fourth Circuit as opposed to the Third Circuit, so we could see different outcomes there.
Yeah, and we're going to circle back to the Alina Habba of it all because that is percolating in the background. But Mark, what are you watching for from Comey's defense and from this case more broadly? Because we started our last hour talking about how this is happening in the court of law, but it's very much a case of public opinion and court of public opinion as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, before we get to the Ali Habba of it all, I love that phrase. I do think that, look, I mean, the legal parts of this are complicated. They're multi-layered, and I don't pretend to have any of the authority that anyone else on this air right now has. But I do think that the crux of this is not so much a selective prosecution, but this is playing out in a way that we have never seen before, which is a president of the United States not whispering his enemies list at all. I mean, basically being extremely public, extremely fulsome about who he wants punished, and basically that going directly everywhere, but also directly to the Justice Department, to the FBI, and what have you. And this is, it seems to be a central part of his narrative. I mean, punishing his enemies. I think at some point, this will probably play out in a lot of different courts over a long period of time. But you do sort of have to wonder, what is the political benefit of vindictiveness, of revenge, when you are effectively sort of heading towards lame duck hood and the economy is still in a pretty rough place, and people are obviously want the president and want the Republican Party and want the leaders of Washington to focus on the economy and other issues.
or even just getting the government started again. You know, maybe that's just me as the senior congressional reporter here, but that's definitely another thing I would add to the list. You know, we've talked about her a few times here, Alina Habba. And David, as we mentioned, the Third Circuit Court of Appeals is hearing arguments now in a case that argues that she, a former Trump attorney, was not lawfully appointed to serve in her new role. So what is the significance of this as it ties into looking at the way we're talking about Lindsay Halligan? Habba's sort of like 4 steps ahead in the legal process on, are you appointed rightfully, lawfully or not?
I think it's not good news for Halligan that the rulings so far about Alina Habba have raised questions about how Trump has been appointing people. And the broader issue is the power of the president. A U.S. attorney across the country, there in every state, has to be approved by the Senate. It's a formal nomination process. It's a key thing, having their review and their consent. And that isn't happening with all these interim appointments. So, you know, and the whole broad, you know, one of the themes of the Trump presidency is increasing presidential power. So it's like so many other issues, this will end up with judges in the courts. So it is very important to see how the ruling is in the Habba case, because it will impact possibly the Comey case as well. Yeah. And just going back in history, one of the ways that the classified documents case was thrown out, this was back in Florida against the special counsel Jack Smith, was that the judge there ruled that Smith had been improperly appointed as a special counsel. So this may seem like a technicality to people, but these rulings can have an enormous impact on these cases. Yeah, foundationally speaking. Yes. So, Barb, when you think about that, what could the domino effect be here if the court finds that Habba wasn't appointed properly? What does that mean for the cases that she has overseen? We've kind of talked about the specter it casts over the Halligan piece, but what about Habba's cases?
Yes, it means that every one of those cases that has been indicted since she took over at that office is null and void. It's the same thing we saw in Florida when Judge Aileen Cannon dismissed the case against Donald Trump, finding that the special counsel had been inappropriately appointed, contrary to regulations and law and the Constitution. If the person who is overseeing that office was not validly in their job, then every defendant is going to have their case dismissed. Now, it probably includes drug dealers, corrupt public officials, all kinds of cases. Now, they could appoint a new U.S. attorney there to remedy that problem and refile some of those cases, but it could mean a mad scramble for people who are working there. It could also mean that if the statute of limitations has expired in the time from when she took over, those cases may be lost to the interests of justice. It also could be that in the interim, if cases are dismissed, defendants who would otherwise be detained because they're a danger to the public would be released.
It's a really excellent point that you make there, especially about what the domino effect could be for people whose cases were decided in a verdict that felt right for what that case actually was. You know, Mark, there is yet another case that we have been talking about over the course of the last few weeks, and that's John Bolton's indictment, something that the president celebrated in comments yesterday. Watch what he said.
I'm allowed to be involved in this. I'm the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the United States. You know that, right? A lot of people say, oh, he's the president. He should. No, I'm the Chief Law Enforcement. I'm allowed to be involved in it, but I haven't chosen to. I see John Bolton just got indicted. That's a good thing. He's a bad guy. I don't know what he did, but he's a bad guy. Stupid kind of a guy. I don't know what he did. It must be pretty severe, but whatever it is, let the courts decide.
So, Mark, we've seen the president continue to play this game of he didn't know what was happening, but he's also the chief law enforcement officer of this country. I mean, what does this tell you, to pull on the thread that you talked about earlier? There's no natural political constituency for revenge and retribution. It's not something that others in the Republican Party are going to pick up and run on as an accomplishment. At least I would expect that they wouldn't. And so what does this tell you about how the president sees himself, sees the legacy that he's actively putting together in second term? I mean, what's the point?
It's a good question. It's unclear what he is getting from all this except personal satisfaction. And look, I mean, he obviously, revenge wasn't just a political theme for him in 2024 and even before that. I mean, this is very much at the core of his being and very much at the core of his presidency right now. And look, he probably figures that any political ramifications of this kind of don't matter because he's already won. He's already clear of any legal jeopardy, it seems like. And, you know, why not just inflict a as much pain as you can because he feels he can do it. Again, I don't see or hear a lot of people applauding for this, but it doesn't mean that these charges aren't very serious and a lot of lives aren't being, majorly disrupted through all of this. So again, we'll see. But I mean, I think the answer to this exists very much in the mysteries of Donald Trump's own brain, which we've been all trying to sort of decipher for many, many years now and probably will for decades to come.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You and I were on the campaign trail in 2015 in the early days of the first Trump campaign, and that was the game then, much as it is now. Barb, this allows us to sort of come full circle. Those comments from the president and the way that they could be used in a selective or vindictive prosecution case, does this make it harder for his own prosecutors?
It does. These comments about his being the chief law enforcement officer, that's a very interesting question. Legally,
Yes.
It may be right, but of course, since Watergate, it has been the norm for presidents to stay away and to promote the independence of the Justice Department. But when he makes comments about individuals like John Bolton or James Comey or Letitia James, he is making the job harder for his own prosecutors because they are likely to face motions from the defense that say the president has harmed their right to obtain a fair trial. He has tainted the jury pool. Now, ordinarily, you can cure some of these kinds of things when a high-profile case has been in the news through jury selection by finding people who have not heard much about the case. But when it's the president of the United States, the most powerful person, the most influential person in the country who's making these statements, that taint is going to be stronger than under ordinary circumstances. So I can imagine every prosecutor out there working on these cases are saying to themselves, would he please stop talking? Because every time he opens his mouth to criticize these people, he is creating this due process problem for them.